Restaurant Unstoppable. Inspire, empower, and transform the industry.
I want you to put yourself back into that place.
Oh, I remember it clearly. And, you know, I opened the door and looked down this hall. This is what's called a shotgun. In New Orleans architecture, this is called a shotgun because you can stand at the front door and shoot a shotgun all the way down.
We learned all about shotguns last night.
And so
We will see you then.
this is Paul and I and Marna
Oh, wow.
when we got the restaurant,
Well,
That's awesome.
1986.
What a jovial looking dude, huh?
Yes, very much so.
okay.
With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, chef owner of Brigtsen's restaurant, Frank Brigtsen. Frank, are you feeling unstoppable
I
today?
do feel unstoppable.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. So I cannot wait to dive into your career. You're like a legend here in New Orleans, and thank you to Paul Tournaman for introducing the two of us. He called you out way back in 2018 or 19, I think. I tried to come out here during the pandemic, but that was just crazy times. We decided it would be best to postpone to make sure things settled down. We made it happen. We're here today, and there's just been so many great things that people have said about you as far as what you've done for this community and what you stand for, and you have no idea how excited I am to make an example of you. So before we get into your story, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Let's do this thing.
Yes. You have more energy than I do right now. I love that. What's your quote?
In cooking, color is flavor, and brown is the color of flavor.
I love that. Why is that the quote you chose to bring to us today?
I think it's such an important part of Louisiana cooking to begin with. The way we utilize onion, celery, and bell pepper, building foundations of flavor by browning those vegetables.
Awesome.
And then it's why the crispy end of a roast beef tastes so darn good, because when you roast a protein or cook a protein like that, the protein converts to a natural glutamate, what we call umami, depth of flavor. And that's what we seek in our cooking, is depth of flavor.
I love it. And before we started, you gave me another quote that I thought was really good about your mama. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, which was that?
I think it was a quote. You something cooking for your mom. I think you were saying.
Oh yeah.
Drop that one on us too, because that was gold.
Yeah, this is a mantra that I give to my chefs in the kitchen, particularly young ones starting out. Make every dish like you're making it for your mama.
Why is that?
I learned that lesson when I was a young chef, an apprentice cook actually at Commander's Palace in the 1870s with Chef Paul. 1970s with Chef Paul Prudhomme. We had a staff meeting, and one of the things he said that really hit home with me was, you chefs are putting your hands on 500, 600, 700 plates a shift, but the guest is only getting one of them. If you let one plate slide that's not quite what it should be, you've done an injustice.
Yes. Awesome. And it kind of reminds me, Chef Evan Hennessy from Dover, New Hampshire mentioned whether you're cooking for one or 100, you do it the same every time. And I think sometimes when it gets super busy, you're concerned about just getting it out, right? And then the quality goes down, but you got to cook it like every dish like it's for your mom. You know, I love that.
Yeah, I got another one for you.
Go for it.
We always have time to do it right.
Yes, I love that. Great way to get this thing started. So where does it make sense to start sharing your story?
Well, my food career, believe it or not, I was just doing the math. This is my 50th year in food service.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you, I guess. And I started in a sandwich shop freshman year of college.
18 years old, right?
Yeah. 17, actually. So, you know, I didn't go to culinary school. I went to LSU, and I had chosen to study fine arts, painting and printmaking, which was not a popular decision with my father.
I can imagine.
And so I had to go to work, and got a job in a sandwich shop. A friend was working there, and, you know, it was okay. I liked it, and I was good at it too.
What do you mean by good at? What part of it were you good at?
Well, this particular operation was a sub shop, and each and every sandwich the meats and cheeses were sliced to order.
Okay.
So if you're working the slicing machine, you took the order and then went and got each individual meat and cheese and put together a unique custom sandwich. And they made me night manager after about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
What, reflecting back at that time, what was it about the way you showed up every day that made you progress so quickly?
Well, I think, you know, in the restaurant business and food service industry, anyone that enters into it, even dabbles in it in college like a lot of people do, you very quickly have to make a decision. Do you want to be in the kitchen or on the floor? Mm-hmm. And in my next job, that's when I made my decision that I liked it in the back better.
So at this point in your career, working at the sub shop, progressing quickly, are you thinking to yourself, I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life? Was that a possibility at this point?
Not at that stage. I continued to work full time through my years of college, and eventually my schooling suffered naturally. And but with fine arts, by year 4, I realized I don't really need a degree, and I'm probably not going to make a living as an artist. And hey, I'm kind of liking this restaurant thing. So when I moved back to New Orleans, I decided to pursue it.
So did you spend 4 years at this same sub shop?
No. 1 year there, and then I went to another spot, a little pasta place. I was a cook, and then again moved up to night manager. And that's when I decided I liked the back, because I had to seat people and deal with customers and stuff, and I was just awkward for me.
Yeah, get into that. I think this is really important. I think it's important to kind of touch different parts of the restaurant to see what lane you belong in. So what was it about the back of house that resonated with you? Well,
I think you're in your own private space to begin with, and up front, greeting people at the door, seating them, which section you're going to put them in. You really have to be pretty smooth and think on your feet. And at that age, 18, 19, 20 years old, I was not that person. And I couldn't wait to get back into the kitchen. Some shifts I was up front, some in the kitchen. And this was LSU. So the busiest days were obviously LSU football days. And in this little kitchen, one day, I rocked 700 covers with a helper.
Wow.
And got a great big pat on the back from the owner, manager. And that sense of accomplishment, and it was so smooth. That sense of accomplishment, I think really, although I didn't realize it at the time, is what we as chefs take away from our job each day. When you know you've crushed it and everything went well and you made people happy, you take that home with you.
Yes, I love that. I'm curious, what is it about the back of the house, or what is it about you that excels in the back of the house?
Well, I think to be successful in a kitchen, it's not about making, one great meal. It's about doing it hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times. But it's what I call doing the dance. It's an orchestrated operation where I call it Frank's 3 T's: taste, timing, and temperature. All of those things have to be on point for a dish and a service to be successful. So you have to, some people have an affinity for mechanics of motion, for instance. Mm-hmm. They're smooth in their motions. They know where this is and that is, and the muscle memory gets developed, and they're just dancing. And others have to work at that a little bit. And that's when I think there comes a time, I've had young chefs here work a station for 3 months and say, okay, what's next? And I say, well, you've done that dish 100 times. Ask me when you've done it 1,000 times. Because you get good when you're not thinking anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just like a football player. Great college football star gets drafted in the NFL, a linebacker. And his first year, he's struggling. He's making mistakes. He's getting beat. And as they'll tell you, he's thinking too much. It hasn't become natural yet. But with experience and repetition, that player will get better because he won't have to think so much. He'll be following his instincts and react naturally. And the problem with repetition is that it's boring, and some people don't embrace that for what it really is. And in our jobs as chefs, repetition is the deal. Things change, maybe staff changes, menu changes, specials are created, but it's the act of doing it over and over and over again that if that doesn't bring you joy, change it up.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious from like a restaurant owner perspective and somebody who's leading a kitchen at your level, what is the benefit of getting a line cook to the point where they can be, like you said, instinctual and act without thinking? Why is that? Why is it so important to get them to that level before moving them on?
Well, in our kitchen, we're very big on cross-training. And, to go back a little bit to the early starts of my career, after moving back to New Orleans, I got a job as a prep cook. And then that job ended. I walked out, the only job I ever walked out on. They had a change in ownership, and it wasn't good. And at the same time, I got evicted from my apartment. They sold the building. My car broke, and I broke up with my girlfriend.
Ooh, is this one day, 1 week, 1 month?
Like within a week or two.
Well, that's a tough
week
right there.
Yeah. I was 24 years old and rudderless.
I can imagine.
So I had to make that phone call. Mom, can I come home? And so I went home. And 24 years old. And after 2 weeks of that, this has got to go. This has got to change. So y'all are too young.
After 2 weeks of being at home with your parents?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Not good.
Yeah.
Y'all are too young to remember this, but there used to be these things that would be dropped in our front lawns each morning. And it was made of paper. And it had stories in it. It was called a newspaper. And in the back of the newspaper was something called the classifieds, where there was help wanted ads. So after those 2 weeks, I picked up the help wanted ads, and there was an ad for Commander's Palace. And I remember the word verbatim. It said, now hiring Creole chefs or people willing to learn Creole cuisine. And so that was me. I was ready to step up to a real restaurant. And Commander's was and still is one of the top restaurants in the world, much less New Orleans. And so I asked Mom to drive me down for an interview. And this is 1978. And my interview was with then executive chef Paul Prudhomme. And so there was a lot of people waiting to be interviewed. The process was lengthy. We talked for about an hour.
Wow.
And he said, okay, Frank, real good. Come back next week and we'll talk again. So I came back the second week, and there was less people waiting to be interviewed. And we talked for another hour.
Wow.
And he said, great. Come back next week and we'll talk again.
Oh, man.
So I came back the third week, and there was only like 5 people. So they were culling. And he said, Frank, we're going to give you a chance. And he said, but you have a choice. We'll hire you as a broiler chef, and we'll pay you good money and expect a lot out of you. Or you can come on as an apprentice in the pantry, make minimum wage, but you can expect a lot out of me. And I said, that's it. That's what I want.
Why that?
I was not ready for the front line of Commanders.
What do you think that showed him?
A willingness to learn, not in it for the money, not overstating my qualifications. That was my culinary school at Commander's Palace.
Mm-hmm. So many things are coming to my mind after 800 plus interviews of hearing good advice, and the things that were kind of under the radar and what you just shared with us that come to mind are hire people who are willing to learn. Right. You don't have to. You see all the time in job ads, and like in this ad, he said people with Creole experience or who are willing to learn. Right. You always see it. Experience required.
Right.
People aren't willing to teach anymore. You have to remember that it's your job to give people these. Like your job as an owner is to make them able. Right.
That's exactly
people
right.
Forget that.
in the early years of Brigtsen's, I happened to be walking in the hall during service, and a customer came up to me and he said, "No wonder my food is not on my table." I'm like, okay. And eventually, I would never say that to a guest, but my answer to that is, and I do say this to my chefs and others, if I have to cook the food for it to be good, that makes me a great cook and a lousy chef.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because chef means chief.
Yes.
And a big part of our job is teaching and training.
Mm-hmm.
And now 50 years into my career and 35 years into Brigtsen's, my gratification and joy comes from giving people an opportunity like I got from Paul Prudhomme.
Yeah. And the other thing that I picked up from that the one-liner from we picked up from Paul was hire slow, fire fast. Talk about hiring slow.
Right.
3 hours.
Yep.
One-on-one
Yep.
to make sure you're a good fit, right? How many people do that today? 3 separate occasions.
Yeah.
Right?
That was, and I didn't realize, the calling part of it and why I took 3 one-hour interviews, but he was trying to get to know me, like all of them. And in that third interview, Eric, he said, "Frank, where do you see yourself in 10 years? What do you want out of life?" And I hemmed and hawed a little bit, and I said, I think one day I'd like to have my own little place. So 7 years later, he and his late wife, Kay, pulled me out of the kitchen at Kay Paul's, sat me down, and said, "Frank, I remember what you said 7 years ago about wanting your own place, and we think you're ready to go out on your own."
I'm loving this interview already. You're like literally letting me up inside, because the third thing I wrote that I haven't shared yet is like when you hire people, and I picked this up from saying like you have a choice. I can put you on the line, we can test you out, or you can become an apprentice, and this is what we're going to do for you.
Yes.
And what I'm going with that is you have to put people on paths of growth.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't just hire them and say work the station. You have to hire them and say this is where you are now, and this is where you'll be if you apprentice, and this is where I can get you.
That's right.
And then even beyond that, what do you want from life? What's your goal? What's your vision? What's your mission for yourself? So I know exactly how I can serve you and help you get there. And people need to know where they're going. They need direction. They need to know that I'm growing professionally. And he seemed to know this all intuitively, because this stuff back in the 70s and 80s wasn't common knowledge, this type of leadership, this type of business knowledge. Where do you think he got this? Was this instinctual for him?
Well, he was a great man, obviously, but he was a self-made man. And, when Paul got that job as executive chef at Commander's Palace, I remember seeing it on the front page of our newspaper. It was a big deal for Ella Brennan and Dick Brennan to hire a Cajun boy, no culinary school experience, to be the executive chef of the most prominent restaurant in the city. And it was a bold move. And it was the beginning of bringing Creole cuisine back to its roots, making it more local, concentrated on local products, local flavors, local techniques. It was a bold move.
So ahead of the curve too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't believe we're already 20 minutes into this conversation. We're still talking about your first, not your first job in the industry, but your first serious role.
Yeah.
Is that safe to say?
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And as it happened, as I mentioned, Commander's Palace was my culinary education. I was only there 6 months. And in 6 months, I worked every station in the house. And the lesson for me and for anyone else listening right now, one of the great things about our industry is that it's about performance and opportunity. I teach, and we'll talk about that too. But I tell culinary students when they graduate, don't go looking for a sous chef's job.
Why is that?
Don't go for a title. The best sous chefs are not hired off the street. They're hired from within.
Yes.
Promoted from within. Don't go for the title. The main thing is find the happy kitchen and the chef that you want to learn from.
Yes.
And get your foot in the door.
Yes. Go. So what I'm hearing from you is go for the knowledge, go for the experience, go
Right.
for the network,
Right.
the people you can associate your name with,
Right.
and go for where you can grow.
Get
Right.
an opportunity and perform and prove yourself. And your sous chef title will come. Those things are earned, you know. I mean, just like, you know, a lot of us chefs, well, probably shouldn't go there, but you don't become a chef by putting on a white jacket
Yeah.
and calling yourself one. It's earned.
Absolutely.
So anyway, my 6 months, I worked every station. And it all started, I'm in the pantry. And, of course, Sunday jazz brunch is a big thing at Commander's. And we do 700-800 covers. So I'm in the pantry by myself, prepping 6 flats of strawberries. We open at 11. And about 10:15, the front line chefs are saying, "Hey, Frank, you know how to make an omelet?" I'm like, "No." And every 10 minutes, "Hey, Frank, you know how to make an omelet?" "No." Well, the sous chef had changed the schedule, and the 2 backline sauté chefs didn't show up for work. They didn't see the new schedule.
Oh.
So at 10 minutes to 11, "Hey, Frank, you're on sauté." Okay. And that's how I learned to shake a skillet, you know, trial under fire. Mm-hmm. And I did okay. You know, they kept me on that station for the jazz brunches on Saturday and Sunday. And about a month into it, I realized, hey, this was a 2-man station. Why am I here by myself? So performance and opportunity. Mm-hmm. Another day, the next movement was I was working pantry, and hot apps are next to me. And the sous chef came over to talk to the chef working that station, John. He said, "John, have you been drinking?" And John said, "Yeah, I had a couple of beers." The sous chef said, "Go home. Frank, you're on hot apps." Boom. So another station.
Yeah. Patience, opportunity, like performance,
Yeah.
earn it, right? Like
Yeah.
Sometimes I think people today especially want to grow faster than there's almost like an entitlement. And I hate to say that and make that assumption, but they forget that it comes with, like you said, performance and opportunity, but mostly patience and persistence, right?
I totally agree. And I think the important thing for all of us to remember, every culinarian, is that we are in food service industry. Service.
What do you mean by that?
You don't work in a kitchen to become a celebrity. Mm-hmm. You're there to serve. Yeah. You're there to work with your colleagues and together orchestrate a great service and make people happy. Yeah. And anything else that comes your way is gravy. Mm-hmm. I have never, 36 years almost here at Brigtsen's, I've never had an agent, a PR person, personal assistant. Maybe I'm dumb, but I haven't.
You know, but you also fill me up when you say that, because I reflect on my own life and what I've been doing this now only 9 years, which is only pales in comparison to how long you've been at your profession, your craft. But at the same time, I think to myself, like, I should be doing more social media. I should be doing more to promote myself. But that takes time and energy. And I think people forget that. And I rather put my time and energy into doing the thing that I do better, and then focusing on my craft, focusing on my skill as an interviewer, and then letting that pull opportunity.
That's right.
It sounds like that's the same approach you've taken.
It is.
It makes me feel like you can get distracted by that stuff sometimes.
Right. And I well, like when we opened here, you know, Paul and Kay helped me. They lent me money, and a real estate agent, an attorney, allowed me to take my sisters-in-law from Kay Paul's. And people got wind of it and were asking me, "Frank, what kind of restaurant is it going to be?" And I didn't know how to verbalize my answer. All I could think was, I just want a good New Orleans restaurant. I knew what that meant. And anybody that grew up here knows what that means. But, you know, I wasn't going to put a label or anything like that on it. I just wanted to get in there and cook. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the transition from being a chef to owner chef is huge for anybody out there that's considering it. It is 2 jobs.
Let's put that on the back burner, the transition. 'Cause I
Yeah.
think that's a really great conversation. But I'm curious, you spent about a year at Commander's Palace before going over to Cape Halls?
6 months at
6 months.
Commanders,
Okay.
and then 6.5 years at Cape Halls.
We've already learned so much from Chef Paul and what
Yeah.
he taught you, and his values have just come out naturally in this conversation. But how did he transform you as a professional? Who were you before then, and who were you coming out of Cape Halls? Like, what did he instill in you as far as what it takes to be successful in business?
Well, I think the most prominent thing about working for Paul was, for him, nothing was impossible. Nothing. I mean, he got asked to do so many things, and we did them all. I mean, from, President Reagan wants us to cook at the economic summit with the world leaders. Okay, let's bring the whole staff and 60 boxes of food on the airplane. Here we go. Let's open Cape Halls in San Francisco for a month. We shut down Cape Halls here and all went to San Francisco for a month and opened a restaurant.
Yeah.
The first pop-up,
Yeah.
if you would. One guy called him, wealthy oilman from Shreveport, northern Louisiana, called him one day and said, Chef Paul, I want to hire you to come cook at my country club. And Chef quoted him an outlandish price, and the guy said, okay. So after Friday night service, we were open Monday through Friday. After Friday night service, we all got on a bus and drove through the night to Shreveport. The next day threw a party. But nothing was impossible.
There's some science involved in this idea of nothing is impossible.
Yes.
And especially with how our brains work, that our brains are giant energy sucks. They suck energy, and to save and conserve energy, we will try to find the path of least resistance. So if we tell ourselves something isn't possible, we'll believe that, and our frontal lobe specifically will shut off. But if you say anything's possible, how do I do this? Or if you say that nothing is impossible, it forces that frontal lobe into hyperdrive, and you start getting creative. You tap into the ether, right?
Yes.
Like anything's possible if you just brainstorm. You ask yourself how, and especially if you have a team of people you're surrounded yourself with, you can tap into all those brains, and you make everybody think how, and then all of a sudden, what was impossible is no longer impossible.
Exactly.
Super powerful.
I mean, we did a lot of hard things. We worked hard. Okay, Frank, we're going to LA this weekend. Okay, yes, chef. Whatever it might be. But those memories and experiences were so invaluable. Paul not only taught me how to cook, he taught me how to be a man. And, and all that implies, I made mistakes, and he would give me another chance. He would let me know I made a mistake. But, and here's the greatest lesson. This is one little snapshot from my career at Cape Halls. One of the things I say, Eric, is food is our medium, but it's a people business. From the suppliers to the staff to the guests. All these relationships have to work to get a plate of food to your guests and be successful. So in the early years of Cape Halls, when we got really busy, there was no dishwashing machine in our kitchen. Everything was washed by hand, from pots and pans to glasses and silverware. And it was a really difficult job. And so this was a busy Friday night, first turn. We had just opened the doors, filled up, tickets all over the board. And Johnny, our new dishwasher, was not keeping up well at all. I couldn't get enough skillets to cook with. Stuff was all over the floor. I mean, just backed up in the weeds. And I had it. I went out to Chef's table. His office was the rear table at Cape Halls.
Okay.
And I have one of those too.
I saw that.
Yeah. And I said, Chef, we got to get rid of Johnny. He's just not cutting it. Now, this is the middle, as busy as a restaurant could be. And he said, Frank, sit down. So I sat down. He said, Frank, I have never seen you this mad. I know it's bad if this is how you are. He said, let me ask you a question. Is Johnny giving 100%? Is he trying his best? And I thought a moment, and I said, yep, he is trying his best. He said, Paul said, well, I can't fire him.
Wow.
And Johnny and I went to work together for about 3 more years and became great friends and got through it all.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm an owner, hiring, working with, a diverse group of people, that lesson has helped me be successful for 36 years.
Paraphrase that lesson, distill that lesson, crystallize it.
If somebody's doing their very best for you, you have to give them a chance. Everybody has different skills, talents, abilities. The beauty of life is in its diversity. That's the lesson.
Yes. And you said he taught me how to be a man. In the essence,
Yes.
Is this what it means to be a man?
Exactly. How to embrace diversity, not hate it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, start with food. We all have palates that crave diversity. We don't want to eat the same thing every day. The beauty of food is in its diversity. And we live on this planet Earth filled with diversity. Fish, seafood, meats, plants, nuts, grains, grapes. It's one of life's great joys.
Yeah.
Now apply that same principle and philosophy to people.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody was like me, it'd be a horrible place.
Yeah. We wouldn't be. I mean, the thoughts that come to mind as you're saying this is we're tribal, and we exist to be to function best in groups of 50. And that collective of 50 people all bring something unique to the tribe. It takes a tribe,
Absolutely.
And with one person you go back 12,000, 15,000 years ago, you take one person, you throw them into the wild, not going to survive. They
Right.
need the tribe because everybody has a special skill, and together that tribe. And your kitchen's a tribe. Together,
Yep.
Everybody has their land. They have their strength. That tribe is your restaurant. You surround yourself with these people, the diversity to be
Yes.
a holistic solution. You need that diversity. You can't do it by yourself.
No. And Brigtsen is truly a great example of that, and starting with, my wife Marna and her 2 sisters, Sandy and Rhonda, that work here all these years. Sandy and Rhonda. Sandy was the first waitress at K. Paul's, and I was the first night chef. That's why we're all here right now. So the 4 of us run the restaurant, in addition to Chef Larry, who's been with me 29 years now. So we each have our strengths and weaknesses.
You were just finished telling us about how your mentor, Paul, really just kind of help form and transform you into the man you needed to be to open your restaurant, Brigtsen's. You're also saying that these people that you were working with, you were finding your own tribe, you're building your own tribe, and you're surrounding yourself with people who complement you during this time. So take it from there and take us through the process of opening your first restaurant.
Well, as it happened, one of our servers at K. Paul's had just gotten her real estate license. So Marcia drove me around, looked at a couple of properties, and, nothing I was interested in. And after about 3 or 4 times doing that, she called in a professional who had been in the business for longer. And she started taking me around. And, I nixed this one, nixed that one. And she said, Frank, what do you want? And, of course, I gave that stupid answer, I'll tell you when I see it. So
it'll talk to me.
So this agent, May Kwong, who's still my agent, she knew the owner of the previous restaurant here on Dante Street and knew that she wanted to sell and get out, but it wasn't on the market. So she talked to her, and she was open to the idea of me coming to take a look. And I opened the front door on this building, and before I walked in, I knew it was the place I wanted. Just that quick. it felt like New Orleans. I loved the neighborhood. I wanted to get out of the French Quarter. I love the neighborhood because it's kind of peaceful here in the River Bend, but still accessible from everywhere in the city. You know, and I knew that I needed a combination of visitors and locals, but it was also the size of the restaurant. Seats about 60, something I could manage. And so we agreed that we would try and work it out. And Paul called the owner of the property, who's a prominent New Orleanian, and Paul negotiated my lease.
How awesome is this, by the way? And I think you look at, like, you hear these horror stories of owners today who straight up resent their team when they want to go on and do other things, right? But the attitude of the most successful restaurateurs is, I'm trying to push you out. My job isn't to keep you here as long as possible to serve myself. My job is to serve you and to make sure you get what you need and do anything you can to get rid of your best people. But what happens as a result of that when you take this mindset?
Well, it's just remarkable.
Right?
Yeah, it's remarkable. Paul and Kay wanted this restaurant at least, if not more than I did. I mean, when he proposed it to me, I said what I always say: "Yes, chef."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Paul negotiated a beautiful lease, structured quite the right way, and I think if we get to the point of talking business and stuff and how to be successful, it starts with a lease. And so the deal was reached. We signed the lease, and we opened 5 days later.
Oh, man. And side note, if you guys have not caught the episode, it either just went live last week or it's going live. It's going live this week, I think. It's literally an interview I did with David Helbron from Helbron and Levy, an attorney out of New York City, like a leading hospitality attorney, all about how to negotiate a lease.
Yes.
So perfect timing. You're really queuing that episode up really well. But you kind of just dropped a bunch of stuff on us on location. You said that it was peaceful. You said it was accessible. You said the location was right because you could attract locals and visitors, and the size was right because it's manageable. And I think that last part's really important. People overextend themselves way too often early in their career. The size, not only does it become unmanageable with just physically being able to manage the moving parts, but also too expensive can be an issue, right?
Yes.
If you go too big too soon, you overextend yourself. You can't keep the butts in seats, or you can't fill all the seats.
Right.
You're gonna have trouble.
Right.
So what's going through your mind as I'm sharing?
Well, keep in mind this was 1986.
Yeah.
So in New Orleans, anyway, we've always been a place of family-owned independent restaurants. New Orleans has always been like that. But in the mid-'80s, this was a time when chef-owned bistro-sized restaurants started to pop up here and there. And that was a novelty in a way, because the chefs themselves were becoming the owners. That was new. I didn't come in here with a business plan. I had to draw one up for the bank, and I had my accountant help me do that. Bank turned me down. But Paul believed in me. Kay believed in me. And I felt probably the way they felt was, if we can just give Frank enough support and let him do his thing, he'll be successful.
Were they investors? Did they have stake? Like, were they stakeholders?
It cost $120,000 for me to buy the business from the previous tenant.
Okay.
So $120,000, and it came from Paul and Kay's pocket.
But was there interest?
No.
Wow.
No.
Because I was curious if you came into this originally as a partner, and that they were investing in you. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
No.
Being somebody who invests in their team, creating opportunity. Like it's all about you're farming people, you're growing people.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with, I think, investing in your people.
Right.
And getting a return. But I'm surprised that he didn't even want that. He
no.
just wanted
There was no legal, business or financial agreement. Nothing on paper. A promissory note was all there was. And, you know, as we got open and started, if I was in, the accountant was Paul's accountant.
Mm-hmm.
So if I need money to pay bills, we talk weekly. You know, can I get, you know, $1,600?
A little float.
Can I get $2,500? So there was some more borrowing, operational. Let's see, we opened in March. That June, a few months later, we got a glorious review in the newspaper. The writer at that time, Mr. Gene Borg, a wonderful guy, he didn't give stars as ratings. He gave red beans because it's New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
So we got 5 beans. So we got wind of it. A friend at the paper called us the night before it came out and told us. So I went down to the newspaper building and like at midnight or 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and bought advance copies and brought them back here. And so we would second line around the restaurant, drinking champagne, celebrating, had our umbrellas, having a ball, which is a mistake.
Why?
Because the next morning the phone was ringing off the hook and everybody's hungover. That review just opened it wide open. We were successful.
I love it. Before we start moving on and talk about the evolution and how you guys grew internally, I'm curious. You said the size needs to be manageable. What is that size? What is a manageable first restaurant in your opinion?
Well, yeah, and keep it in mind, I have no business background.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I guess it's a matter of risk. But, you know, K. Paul's had 55 seats.
Mm-hmm.
Brigtsen's had 60. So this was a number. You know, I can do a turn of 50 people.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, the first 12 years we were open, I had 1 6-burner stove.
Wow.
And I did all the cooking myself.
First year. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
What happens if you're sick? Were you sick at all during that time?
I'm sure I was. I remember the first night I took off. My sous chef came with me from K. Paul's.
Okay.
He became my sous chef.
Yeah.
He was a working
There was no
horse.
remorse there either that you left with a bunch of his.
I asked him.
employees?
I said, "Can I take Steve with me?" He
And
said,
you had
said yes.
Sandy and Rhonda.
Sandy, and then Rhonda came too.
Yeah.
And Sandy and Kay were best friends.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've been open for a while, and Steve is a good chef, good cook, and I decided to voluntarily take a night off, which was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what happened?
Got slammed.
He set off the fire extinguisher system.
Oh man.
Yep, somewhere there's a Polaroid picture of the whole kitchen covered in that white foam.
Oh,
the
my
restaurant
goodness.
shut down,
Oh,
and it was a
man.
long time before I took off again.
I bet. How long? I'm curious.
Oh, months.
Yeah.
But you know, the evolution, it started from me doing all the service cooking and sous chef doing the pot cooking, and I didn't have recipes, and you know, a lot of the food I did was definitely derivative of K. Paul's. That's where I learned, and Creole and Cajun food is my thing. So over time, I started to write recipes, although I didn't like it. But if you got invited to be on a TV show, like the local news show, come to a segment, oh, yeah, sure, and bring your recipe. Aye, really? Okay. So you spend 2 days writing the recipe, and people would write in for it in the old days. So eventually I embrace recipes as teaching
So they would
tools
write into you, or they'd write into the media
to the
outlet?
station.
So they're taking your recipe to build their list.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Smooth.
But eventually I adapted myself to the value of recipes, because if I could have a working recipe and hand it to my sous chef or any of my chefs, I don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's going to be the way I want it.
Yes,
That's the beauty of it.
Let's shelf that because that's huge, and that's the evolution, transitioning from a chef to an owner. To something you mentioned earlier, which I really want to get into. But before we get into that, I really want to kind of paint the picture of surrounding yourself with your tribe. I want to talk about the roles, the lanes that Sandy and Rhonda were in. You pulled them. You also had your sous chef. So what was your strategy? What are you thinking? Like, you're thinking to yourself, I'm the chef. I'm the back of house. I don't know, fill in the blank.
Right. So what I had to learn was to take care of business during the daytime. All these salesmen coming to see me in particular, drop-in salesmen of every imaginable product. And particularly after that review, when we got on people's radar, and we were bombarded. I was bombarded by people wanting my time. And I couldn't wait for 5:30 so that I could shut all that off and get on the stove and do my thing. So I did not like the business part of it in the beginning. Fortunately, our accountant, who was Chef Paul's accountant, Bo Parent, was brilliant. And he did very detailed monthly financial statements that weren't just P&L statements, but statistical history. How many covers, check average, every possible number that could tell the story. And he taught me what's important.
He was Restaurant 365 before you.
Absolutely, he was. And other accountants would say, Bo's a dinosaur. That software he uses is antiquated. But it was so informative. And in a matter of probably 3 years, I began to love the business part of it.
Why? What happened? What changed?
Well, I could see how the engine drives the train. I'm not in the dining car. I'm not in the galley. I can also be up in the engine and seeing what I need to do to keep this thing rolling. Which avenues of marketing, because back then it was print advertising mostly, newspapers and magazines, to push the bottom line.
Yeah. I think you're, again, getting into the evolution, the transition from chef to owner.
Yeah.
But back to the lanes, the people you were surrounding yourself with. So you're alluding to the fact that you had the accountant, the business analytic person.
Yes.
That wasn't you. And that was your mentor, your coach who gave you that information. What roles were Sandy and Rhonda filling?
Well, they were front of the house. Okay. And Marna, bless her heart, my wife, this was her first restaurant job, owner. Mm-hmm. She was a court reporter.
Was she your wife when you opened?
Yes.
Okay, so you met at K. Paul's?
Yes.
Okay.
She, the three sisters are from North Dakota. Sandy came to New Orleans for Mardi Gras one year, fell in love, started coming all the time, met Kay. They worked in a bar in Bourbon Street together. And then when K. Paul's opened, Kay asked Sandy to come work with her. And then Rhonda was living in San Francisco. She came to visit. She got enticed to come work at K. Paul's as a bartender. She was in the business. And Marna just came to visit one Christmas, and we fell in love. And happened quickly.
So Sandy and Rhonda are sisters, and Marna are all sisters?
All of them. Yeah.
Family business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so Rhonda had, like some management and bartending experience. Sandy is the greatest waitress to ever live. We call her the queen of fluff. Sandy, that table needs some fluffing. She can do it. And she's still our spiritual cheerleader.
Maybe if I see her before I leave, I can ask her to give us some fluffing tips.
Yeah. She might. No, not today.
Oh, okay.
But she's still the queen of fluff. I mean, all these Mardi Gras decorations you see in the restaurant right now, that's all Sandy.
Okay.
Now, she's 77 years old.
Wow.
And she's still our cheerleader.
I love that. Okay, so I can tell you're chomping at the bit to talk about the evolution of a chef, and this is really important, to chef to owner. You talked about recipes. You talked about seeing how the engine drives the train. What's the translation there? What do you mean by the engine drives the train?
Well, for instance, the number in our statistical history that I learned from Bo, the number that made the biggest impact was covers per open night. So one of the biggest things we did that was hugely successful, typically in New Orleans, summertime is slow. There's not a lot of visitors. So it can be dreadfully slow in the summer. So one summer, I called Paul. I called him on the phone. I said, Chef, it's so slow, and we particularly can't get anybody to come early. He said, give him a free appetizer from 5:30 to 6:30. So we tried that, and it was working a little bit. And that led to an idea I had to do what became known as an early evening special. So from 5:30 to 6:30, and this is, I don't want to date this too much, but it was 3 courses for $12.95.
What was it called? The early what?
Early evening special. So if you come to Brigtsen's from 5:30 to 6:30, you can get a 3-course menu for $12.95. So, our check average at that time was probably $28.
Wow. That's huge.
And over time, we'd have a full house on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 5:30, 6:30.
So a lot of people would push back on this and say, you can't give away too much.
That's exactly what chefs said.
Okay.
I can't sell my food for that money. I said, well, if you don't get people in the door, you're not going to be serving food at any price for very long. And that's the thing. Because what we realized was, you have to be cost conscious, of course. But it's what Bo called revenue contribution.
What does that mean?
That means instead of taking in $10,000 a week, you're taking in $13,000 a week. So that's 30% more cash in the bank than you had before.
Wait, say that one more time.
Revenue contribution.
Yeah.
So if your normal week is $10,000,
Yep.
but the early evening special bumps it up to $13,000,
Okay.
that's 30% more revenue.
Total revenue.
Yeah, total revenue.
Yeah.
Top of the line.
But profit is different because you're not making the same margins.
True. But there's a balance there. There's and it's literally a balancing act. I mean, we served a lot of chicken. It was, you have to be extremely cost conscious.
You're not giving anything away. You're selecting which
Right.
entrees you get.
Yeah. I mean, maybe instead of running 32% food cost on that menu, maybe you're running 38 or 40.
Yeah.
But your staff's making tips.
Mm-hmm.
What we realized was the intangible benefit. People walk in at 5:30, 5:45, and the place is bustling.
Yeah. What's that look like from outside? People driving by.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're like, man,
So,
I
yeah.
love this place.
So I think what I've heard in perspectives on this is that's not a loss. That's an investment. That's a marketing expense.
Yes.
You have to look at it as a marketing expense. And today, the evolution of that, I would say, is you're not giving food away. You're trading it for contact information.
Exactly.
Because now we have all these tools and services to capture the data, right?
Good point.
So you're saying, okay, I'm going to give you a discount, but in exchange, you're going to give me your email and your phone number when you make the reservation, and I'm going to segment you to a specific list and market to you to create a long-term relationship.
Exactly.
And
That's
you
exactly right.
gotta look at it that way. You're building your
and
list.
they'll come back on a Saturday night too.
Yeah,
And they'll buy wine and all that stuff too.
and you can't let the discount be the draw. It is the draw, but thereafter, the draw is the experience that they had.
Exactly.
They had it.
That's
right?
the seed you're planting.
The best marketing is food in malls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, the staff's perspective, it was extremely healthy because instead of standing around from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, an hour and a half with no tickets, we crank it up in the beginning.
Yeah.
So the kitchen's in the groove, the servers are making tips. It just keeps the whole train moving.
So to go full circle, you started this with saying covers per night is the metric. So you're getting a whole new round of seatings, a third round, or how many rounds typically? 4?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that would be 2 full seatings instead of 1.
Got it. You talked about recipes, and you realized that having to draft this recipe for this media outlet was the first time you actually cemented it and put it in writing. But I mean, a recipe in itself is like the most basic system, right? It's a process. It's a step-by-step process. I mean, businesses have recipes beyond the food. Like, here's the opening recipe. Here's the closing recipe. I'm talking about like checklists, right?
Yes.
And that was the first checklist that you had to write. And you noticed from that first experience that by writing it down, what happened?
It became a teaching tool. And the thing about it is, as painful as it seemed to me in the beginning, once you got it, you got it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Chef Larry and I still make jokes. We break out a dish we haven't done in 3 years. Hey, this recipe still works. I said, yeah.
It didn't break.
But, you know, eventually, you know, I compiled a little repertoire of recipes. And now today, each one of my chefs has their own binder in the kitchen with a recipe for every dish they make. And the binders grow. The longer you're here, the bigger your binder gets. And so, you know, writing a recipe is, to me anyway, not something to be taken lightly. I mean, yes, there's measuring, there's timing, there's temperature, but the method, how can you describe everything you do in the most understandable way? Good recipes work, and they work consistently. And I get that comment a lot, and I think that's, you know, very gratifying.
So is it hard to believe that we're already an hour into this conversation? It goes so fast, and the year in your timeline is still like 1989. We got a lot of time to cover. We still got so much to talk about. So take a few steps back. I like to say, let's get in the airplane. Let's zoom up to 30,000 feet, and reflecting back over the evolution of Brigtsen's. What were like the pivotal points that you know? I think right now you're probably, as an owner, you're in second or third gear, right?
Yes.
And this is a 6-gear car.
Yes.
If current time today is 6 gear, how did you shift those gears?
Well, you know, as human beings, we don't always embrace radical changes in our lives. A lot of changes that happen to us as individuals and as societies are due to circumstances or events that many of them are bad. And so the one I want to talk about is Hurricane Katrina. You know, I'm born and raised here in New Orleans, 4th generation. And Katrina, you know, changed all of us. And we were very lucky. You know, we didn't suffer severe damage at home or the business, but it uprooted our lives for a long time. We were closed for 4 months.
Wow.
Everything you take for granted is gone, and gradually came back. Now, we could do another 2 hours on that, but here's the crux of it. As bad as Katrina was, I'm glad I went through it.
Okay, why?
Because it made me a better person.
Some silver lining here.
It gives you perspective. In adversity, the human spirit rises, and that's what everyone here did. And there's opportunity. And so I had a turning point in my soul in those months of recovery. And I felt a need. What happened to the restaurant landscape here was interesting. And it starts with the population. The demographics of the city changed. Thousands of people left and never came back. Did you know 90% of our doctors moved away?
Wow.
90%. Wow. So Oxnard, a local wonderful healthcare facility, hospital, they started recruiting, and they brought in people from around the world to fill this vacuum. So the diversity of New Orleans population just grew. I mean, people from all over now are here bringing their palates. And so it was reflected in, as restaurants began to reopen after Katrina, new restaurants, different restaurants. I mean, we've always had a diverse culture here. We've always had Vietnamese population here who came after their radical change, the Vietnam War. Central American, Nicaraguan, Honduran people here. And so now it's even more diversified. And the restaurants that were opening as a kind of a crusty New Orleanian, I would joke and say it's easier to find a taco now than it is to find a po' boy. But what I felt was that, I've been given this gift of doing Creole cuisine for my livelihood. And it's time for me to stand up and protect and preserve it. I don't want it to go away. And that was a conversation a lot of us had. We don't want to lose our New Orleans culture. And so I made a phone call to a friend of mine, Randy Sheremy, who's a professor at the John Fo's Culinary Institute, Nicholls State University in Thibodaux, about an hour and a half from here. And I said, Randy, I want to come teach. You got a job for me? Can you make a spot for me? He said, of course, Frank, of course. We need somebody to do classic French. I said, no. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a job. I want to teach my stuff, our stuff. I want to ensure the best I can that we remember the vitality and wonderful nature of Creole and Cajun cuisine. So they created a course for me called Contemporary Creole Cajun Cuisine.
I mean, you're lighting me up right now, and I can't help but reflect on the core values that I've put together because of all these lessons I've learned. And in order, it's integrity, which I feel like Paul represented that, right? And that's what he instilled in you. Then you're a student first, so we have integrity. We are students. It's that process of learning, doing it 1,000 times, 10,000 times, right? And then we are educators. It's not enough to learn. You have to pay it forward. You have to take the torch, and we are all here because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Right? Yes, we are where we are because of the people that came before us, and we have to pay it forward. And that's the only way we're gonna get better. Yep. Right. I mean,
when I put this white jacket on every day, which I did a couple of hours ago, I put on 300 years of Creole history.
Wow.
In my generation, Eric, I didn't know anybody that was in culinary school. My best friend went to the CIA. I said, what? He said, it's culinary school. I said, oh, what? I never heard of it. I learned my trade like most people before me did in the kitchens of New Orleans restaurants from the best Creole chefs you've never heard of. Leroy Thomas at Commandus taught me so much. Stanley Jackson. And these are guys and gals that just grew up in the business. Yeah, their uncle worked here, so they got a job as a dishwasher, things like that.
You're cementing their legacy. You're paying it forward.
Yes.
You're passing the torch. You have to do that.
I am a part of a continuum. I'm a cog in a wheel. And that's why I went to teach at Nicholls State, and I still teach there.
Yeah. So this all started with you saying with Katrina, and that was 2006, correct?
Yes.
So this is
2005.
2005. But this is also a very unique time in human existence anyway, because it's around this time, 2007 specifically, right off the heels of Katrina, that the smartphone starts coming into play.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that believe that that's what really transformed food across the country, or at least diversified food across the country.
More exposure.
Because you in Louisiana are seeing what's happening in California. So you're seeing what's happening in New York. You're seeing what's happening on the other side of the planet in Asia, in Europe. So now we have this window peering into every kitchen. This happened overnight.
Yes.
Right. So now there's food and knowledge is being transferred faster than ever. So which I think it's interesting because it created diversity, and now every city has a food scene, right? But at the same time, it kind of threatened cities' culture and tradition, right? And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. And you wanted to make sure that you set that in stone,
right? The regional nature of us, and that's what Paul was all about. Yeah. But you're absolutely right, and I think Food Channel falls in the same way. I mean, they opened doors and opened eyes to the diversity of different cuisines and cultures from around the world. And smartphones, I grew up watching the Jetsons, and when
Foreshadowing there.
when desktop computers came out, I'm like, yeah, one day we're going to be walking around with one in our hand.
We're the hover cars.
And now we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, during the recovery of Katrina, our phone system was broken.
Okay.
Our area code was crushed. I couldn't call you if you were sitting right there.
Wow.
I couldn't call my insurance agent. I talked to a person in Chicago. But we learned how to text, for the first time, because it was the only way to contact people. So yeah, it was a metamorphosis, and that is part of the reason I went to Nichols too, because a lot of the students there are from Louisiana and surrounding states, and they grew up with crawfish etouffee and gumbo. But now, they didn't grow up eating McDonald's; they grew up eating sushi. So, they want to make sushi. They want to do this. They want to do that. And that's wonderful. I love that. But before you leave my class, you're going to learn how to make perfect rice and a brown roux in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I still do that.
I love it. So when you said in adversity, the human spirit rises,
yes.
What was rising in you? Paraphrase that.
Well, once Brigtsen's became successful, there were opportunities, and we thought about some of them, let's get a bigger place.
Let's get pre-Katrina at this point or post-Katrina?
Both.
Okay.
Both. Because by Katrina, we had been open 19 years.
Yeah.
So, I was offered a restaurant downtown. I took a look at it. A bigger place. Well, I took a look at it, and we turned them all down.
Wow.
Because this is our happy place. And I'm not a multi-unit kind of guy.
I was curious about that. Like, honestly, we were talking about this on the way here. I was like, been open since 1989, one location. I was like, how deep are we going to go into? Like, there's going to be so much to talk about. But the conversation is rolling, my friend. Like, there's no shortage of things to talk about. And I mean, what's triggering inside of me is this idea of growth. And I think when we think growth, we think external growth.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that argue the only way to stay successful in the restaurant industry is you have to grow. You have to switch it up. You need to evolve some way. However, from the outside looking in, because you're so about tradition and not changing, right? It's almost it's opposite of what people think. But what is growth is my follow-up question.
And I think, a lot of it's, you have to look at the individual and their personalities, Emerald did fabulous. That wasn't me. And we're great friends, and I respect the world of Emerald and everything he's done. He's a great, great man. But, with me and the three sisters, we're not multi-unit people, looking to do more than one restaurant. But there came a time around 2005 and early 2000s, really, where I personally wanted some creative growth. And if it's not going to be another restaurant, what is it? So one day I came in and there was a wrapped gift on my desk. And it was wrapped beautifully with a little fork and a spoon. I opened it up, and it was a proposal from a local lady named Judy Jurisic, who I had never met before. And it was her idea for a cooking school here in New Orleans for the public. There was one or two, but she had a unique vision. She had spent 6 months in Florence and attended a lot of these half-day cooking experience type things. And she said, why doesn't New Orleans have something like this? So that's where I began teaching for the public. It was called the New Orleans Cooking Experience, not around anymore. But for 15 years, every Thursday night, I stood behind an island and cooked for 10 people. And I'd demo the whole menu for 2 hours, and then we'd all sit down and eat. And it was glorious, glorious. And that was my creative fulfillment.
So I'm loving that this is where you're going. So what I was hoping that you'd pick up, and you did pick it up, is that growth doesn't have to be external, physical.
Exactly.
Growth should be, in my opinion, internal.
Yes.
And if you focus on internal growth, and for some people, that's paying it forward. That's, you don't truly master your craft until you can teach other people how to do it. And that's the path of growth you chose. And that path of growth, the growth has served you. But I'm curious, how do you think that path of growth has served you and your business?
Well, I think it's all interconnected. I mean, teaching those classes was really good for Brigtsen's restaurant. I mean, I still have friends. I had one in last week who came down from New York and brought a restaurant person in to meet me. She had taken a couple of classes with me over the years. And that thing ended 5 years ago. I still have so many new friends that come to the restaurant off those classes. But here's another thing I say a lot. Teaching is the best education. By starting these classes with Judy, I began to have to verbalize what I knew about my own food.
Yes.
And put it into words. And over time, I got pretty darn good at it. And it helped me understand where I'm coming from and my own personal context and what makes New Orleans special, what makes Creole culture and cuisine so special. And so it was, and it was an incredible education. And I get the same but different kind of gratification teaching in the university context as well at Nichols. 1, 2, 3, 4 of my 5 chefs back there are graduates of Nichols, former students of mine. I also, one of the great things that Chef Emerald did too was create the culinary arts department, help create the culinary arts department at a local high school, the New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts, NOCA. It's a special school, state-owned school, but it's strictly for the creative arts. You know, there's dance, there's classical music, there's theater, and for many years they didn't have culinary. So Culinary started about 12 years ago. Emerald built both of the kitchens. The last one, $2 million that he raised with his foundation.
Wow.
My pastry chef is one of my NOCA graduates. So then I started teaching. When the place opened, in my mind and to my wife, I said, they better ask me. So sure enough, Sally, who runs the Institute, came and invited me to be their chef in residence.
Wow.
So there was a time, my friend, when I had 4 jobs.
That's
ongoing. Weekly at the New Orleans Cooking Experience, 2 days a week at NOCA, and 1 day a week at Nichols, and oh yeah, the restaurant.
What made you able to do this? What made this possible?
The people around me.
What else?
I couldn't say no. It was so hard.
Nothing's impossible.
Oh, and then, I forgot. In 2009, we did take on a second restaurant.
Wow. How'd that go?
Well, now here's a frank story for you. I know I'm rambling off topic.
No, this is why we're here. Ramble away, my friend.
So I grew up in a place called River Ridge,
which
is a suburb 17 minutes from here. And the neighborhood restaurant my family grew up with was called Charles Seafood. And my first restaurant memory is me sitting in a high chair with my mom picking boiled crabs for me.
Wow.
So I was an infant, and I can still see it in Charles Seafood dining room. This is where we got our seafood, po' boys, boiled crawfish, crab, shrimp, all the good stuff, man. family-owned place, Charlie Palmisano. Charlie Petrosi, sorry. So anyway, we drive by that restaurant to and from work, you know, every day, twice a day. We drove by Charles Seafood, and it was for rent. It was shut down. The owners had sold it. The next person that rented it didn't work out. So it was shut down, and we kept driving by for a few months. And one night I was following my wife home, and she pulled in. I pulled in. She got the phone number, and we called them up. Now, as I said before, I didn't want a second restaurant.
Yeah.
That's not the reason we did it. I wanted to bring back Charles Seafood for that community.
Okay.
The restaurant that I grew up loving so much.
Got it.
It meant so much to that community, and I wanted to bring it back.
So what ended up happening with the restaurant?
We're very proud of what we did there. It ended after 4 years because of an evil landlord.
Okay. So back to what we were talking about earlier, negotiating a lease.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
What did we learn in this lesson?
Well, fortunately, one of my best friends is one of the best attorneys in the world. So we didn't get burned, but we exited.
Okay. So what would you, knowing what you know now after this experience, what would you have done differently going into that agreement?
Well, let me just say that my attorney friend also grew up out there. And the landlord guys also grew up out there. We all knew each other growing up. And first thing Kyle warned me about was, you know who you're dealing with. They have a bad reputation.
Yeah, we're not going to name names either.
No. But ultimately, yep, they did what they do.
So, I mean, I don't want to, I know it's probably sensitive because you don't want to talk poorly about anybody, but
No.
What was it that actually happened that you can give our listeners a foreshadowing of not to get into this, like avoid this situation?
They tried to seize my assets based on a technicality.
Okay.
By not doing some requested repairs in a timely manner. That's their MO.
So you were falling short of your rent, and
Nope.
No. So
Nope.
help me understand.
Well, there was a list of repairs. Part of the lease was I'm responsible for the whole thing.
Okay.
All repairs and maintenance. So there's a list of things like, a hole in the parking lot.
Got it.
Things like this. And that was in December. And as it happened, my mom was having a bad time.
Oh.
And dementia, multiple falls at home, in and out of ICU, trying to get her into a care facility, and I didn't get the repairs done.
Yeah. This immediately reminds me back to the words of our friend Paul Prudhomme. Is he doing, what did you say? I wrote it down. Is he trying 100%? Is he giving it his all? Or are you giving it your all?
Oh.
And this is what it means to be a man, or just generally a good person.
Yeah.
Right? It's compassion.
I needed a little compassion.
Exactly.
And those guys knew my mom.
Yeah. We don't need to go any deeper into that.
Can't go any further.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So anyway, it all ended, but it was actually a good thing because it not immediately, but shortly thereafter, improved our quality of life. Just having one again.
Yeah. And I'm loving the story, and I'm looking down. We have 25 minutes left together, and I know you got to start getting ready for service. So I want to respect your time. The mission statement again: inspire, empower, and transform. You've definitely inspired us. You've definitely empowered us for sure because of the lessons you shared with us today. I want to focus on transformation now, and I can't help but think, being in business now, you opened in 1986, correct?
That's correct.
1986. We're now, how many total? I'm horrible. I'm 35, so 35 years in business.
Yeah.
I was born in 85. Easy math. How have you found the balance of maintaining and reserving your identity and keeping this place, what it has always been, and not changing, not steering too far off course of your brand and your identity, but also at the same time having to evolve because the business landscape is changing. How have you found that balance of maintaining your identity and who you are and what you do without sacrificing that to evolution in the changing landscape of business?
That's a very deep question, and I think it all comes back to people. I mean, look at the pandemic. Mm-hmm. We shut down for 4 months. We could have opened sooner, but I didn't think it was safe. Mm-hmm. And this could be, a very long story, but let me just say this. We went to a meeting of hospitality people in March downtown at a hotel one Monday morning, put on by our Tourist Commission and the Restaurant Association, and we were going to discuss the pandemic and how we as restaurants can deal with it, what we have to do in this new landscape. Yeah. And before the meeting started, our governor called the head of the Restaurant Association and said, y'all can do takeout only. You got to shut down the dining rooms.
And your food, I feel like that just does not do justice to your food.
Right. Yeah. Now, this is transformation. Mm-hmm. That's what 2020 was all about. So we left. The meeting was called off. Marna and I left. On the way home, I'm calling my chefs, Larry and Emily and Elliot. I said, we're closed on Monday. Mm-hmm. I said, can you please come to my house? We need to make a game plan for the week. We can't do indoor dining anymore. So we did takeout only, mostly with the stuff on our regular menu, which much of it did not travel well. So Tuesday we did it. Wednesday we did it. Thursday, I was standing in the hall watching customers pick up, all of them are dear friends that we know. This is before we knew about masks, things like that. And I'm seeing Marna 6 inches from one of our best customers, congregating, 3 or 4 people congregating. I shut the place down. Mm-hmm. I said, we are not doing this, honey. It's not safe. And so that was it. 3 days of that, and I shut down. And so a couple of weeks later, Congress did one of the best things they've ever done, passing the CARES Act, which increased unemployment. So all 20 of our employees were able to get on unemployment at a subsistence level. And I said, good, now just stay there. Mm-hmm. When are we reopening? I said, I don't know. I shut it down. But you're okay. Stay home, stay safe, get your unemployment. If you want to go do side work, fine. But it's not safe for us to be in the restaurant. So that was April. The next month, May, early May, the governor, who I love our governor, by the way. He's done an incredible job and is still doing an incredible job leading us through this. But, restaurants are part of the economy. They need to get open if they can. So he announced phase 1. You could open at 25% capacity. And so a local television station called me and said, Frank, phase 1, can we come over and talk about it, about your reopening? I said, I'm happy to talk to you, but I'm not reopening. She said, what? I said, I don't think it's safe to open right now. Mm-hmm. She said, well, when are you going to reopen? I said, August. August? That seemed like forever.
Why August for you?
Because that's when the unemployment ended.
Got it.
Let's just sit tight.
Yep.
She said, oh, wait, that's part of the story too.
Yep.
So they came over and we talked about that. So here's part of the transformation was the 4 months we were closed. We were the beneficiaries of some very good help. And I will mention a name, the James Beard Foundation, mm-hmm. converted all of their resources to restaurant recovery. And all of us applied for a grant, and we got a grant that was extremely helpful. for years, getting back to recipes, thousands of people have asked me, Frank, when are you going to write a cookbook? I'm like, oh.
Is this the cookbook that's on the mantle behind us?
Yeah. And I would say, well, when I stop cooking, I'll write. So
You made use of your time.
I stopped cooking.
Yeah.
So Marta said, why don't you write a cookbook for us? I had done one to benefit the Houston hurricane victims a few years before. I said, okay. So I wrote one, and it took off. And I started, still sell it through our website, Brigtsen.com. And then I did a second one, a summer edition. And it's called Stay at Home Cooking, because I'm a chef.
Yeah. I got to get a copy of those before.
I don't cook home.
Don't let me leave without a copy.
You know,
of those,
we
please.
cook home Sunday night maybe.
Yeah.
So now Mara and I are at home cooking every night. And
Change
so
of pace, right?
it was a lot of fun for 3 months.
So this is what it's like.
So the books, and then I did some of my seasoning blends too, and bottled and sold them. And Marna set up a shipping department. She and Rhonda were in there shipping. We'd have 8-10 postal boxes every day going out of my house.
Wow.
Those books paid our rent for 4 months.
Do you mind getting into the revenue? Can you share numbers with how much you were able to generate?
Well, I think just during that summer, we probably sold, 2,000 of each book.
Wow.
You know,
How much were each book?
20, 25. So do the math.
Right.
And so with that and the CARES Act, we had a target date.
Got it.
Well, actually, there was the first round of PPP, which didn't make sense for many people, including us. But I already had my target date. We're going to open August 1st. Takeout only,
Okay.
because I'm still not ready.
Yeah.
Personally,
Yeah.
I am not ready to do dining room. What we do in restaurants is the most dangerous thing you can possibly do in a pandemic
You get together.
for an airborne
Yeah.
respiratory virus.
Closed space.
Yeah.
Lots of people.
Sit close to your family and friends, take your mask off, and eat and talk.
Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
I didn't want to expose my staff to it. So about the time we opened, the second phase of PPP came out, and we were fortunate enough to get it.
Yeah.
Now, what that did was solve the problem of what do we do with tipped employees if we're doing takeout only, whose salaries were so dependent on gratuities. So we were able to pay. Everybody came back, except one young lady who moved away. Everybody wanted their job back, and it was my job to give it to them. So our servers became takeout specialists and phone answerers at $18 an hour.
Nice.
Thank you, PPP.
Yeah. That's
Right?
creativity right there. Figure it out.
We have 4 of them sitting
Yeah.
around all day long. We didn't do online ordering. We don't do online reservations. We're old school.
Yeah.
Talk to me. And then people would come pick it up. And so it was beautiful.
That is beautiful.
And then when PPP ran out in mid-November, that's when I opened up the dining rooms. I waited as long as I possibly could.
Yeah. Do you still feel unsafe?
I still feel we all have to be careful.
Yes.
I think it's much, much better, and mainly because of vaccinations.
Yes. Yes. We've covered so much. One thing that I want to make sure, and we pause here. If we go a little over 3 o'clock, will that be an issue for you? Okay, just making sure. And the one thing I still want to get out of you is, again, this idea of transformation.
Yes.
We are in a very unique time. Our industry is in a very unique time where we're all forced to be still.
Yes.
And to choose how we come back. And I think we're it's a great opportunity to really question what's broken with our industry, what's wrong with our industry, and what needs to change in our industry. So somebody like yourself who has so much experience, such a breadth of experience in this industry, entire career in this industry, in your opinion, what's broken with our industry, and how should we choose to come back to transform the industry?
I think the restaurant industry is at its most critical, pivotal time. And the reason is the economics do not work anymore.
No, it's broken.
It's totally broken.
What do you mean by that? What's broken about it?
The whole nature of restaurant economics are based on food costs and labor costs. Those are so ridiculous. I haven't even looked at last year's financial statement yet.
So you're saying the cost of labor and food are
Yes.
just constantly rising right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, let's step back a little bit. You know, every now and then you get a comment about, you know, $35, I can get that bottle of wine at the store for 10. Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
What a ripoff. No, it's not. They're not seeing, that person is not seeing what that revenue contribution does for the overall experience. It's not a grocery store markup. It's paying for all these people.
Mm-hmm.
You can open up a shoe store with 2 or 3 employees and mark up X amount and do X amount of volume, and the math is pretty simple.
Yeah.
But in our business, there's so many moving parts from A all the way to Z, starting with suppliers, receiving, storage, prep, cooking, plating, serving, busing, washing, breaking down, etc.
Yeah.
So that's why that bottle of wine is $35. So, I mean, my transformation, Eric, was this, and it has been since 2020. Throw the business model out the door.
Yes. So what's your new model? What's your new approach? How did you
It
change?
starts with people.
Okay.
The number one thing for me and for everyone else is get the right people into your business.
Mm-hmm.
The people that want to be there, the people that want to do the job.
How do you find those people? How do you keep those people around?
I teach.
What do you teach?
I recruit. I pick and choose.
What are you teaching? What are the lessons? Like, what are you trying to instill?
Opportunity.
How do you teach?
When I tell young chefs looking for a job, whether it's at Brigtsen's or anywhere else, think about where you want to go. Ask to go in there and observe for 1 hour or do a stage. Put your eyes on that operation. Is that going to be your happy place? Find your happy place first. Some of the greatest restaurants in the world are horrible places to work.
Yeah.
Find your happy place. Forget the title. Get your foot in the door with the chef you want to learn from, with the crew you want to be with, and let it roll.
So when you say you're teaching, or you're like, what are you teaching? What are the things that we need to be teaching young people coming in? And get specific. Who are we teaching?
Yeah, well, the difference between my generation and the current status is there's more culinary students. Mm-hmm. Now that's on the wane too. Mm-hmm. Enrollment at the school
I think that's kind of a good thing.
At,
I think kids were getting in trouble, getting way too deep in debt.
I
to
agree.
learn on the job.
I agree.
Yeah.
Education never loses its value, but I believe it had created high expectations for entry into the workplace. Mm-hmm. You know, you're still going to have to come in as an entry-level person pretty much, or a line cook anyway, and work your way up to supervisor or management position in the kitchen. You still have to earn that. But it does create a more well-rounded base of people to draw from. And I try and do what Paul did for me, is to just give them an opportunity and the tools and just let them see where they want to go. And, you know, Brigtsen's does not offer health care benefits, 401k. What we do offer is a happy workplace. You know, so you can go work at a hotel and get all that benefit stuff, and that's a wonderful thing. But you can spend some time here too, and grow and become the person you want to be. You know, nothing's forever.
Chef, I'm going to drill down and go even further. You say give them the tools and the opportunities. Give me examples of the tools.
Mentorship, one-on-one. You know, come learn from Chef Larry.
And what do those lessons that you're giving them look like? What are the things that you're teaching them?
Well, for us, and especially Chef Larry, it's consistency in your food and your work. There's one thing that rubs him the wrong way: inconsistency.
Yeah.
And I give you the tools in that binder to make it consistent. And you learn some of the business part of it too, in the sense that we do a full daily inventory of every food product in the kitchen. That's my baby.
Who's a part of this?
All of them. Every one of them.
Every person you
Yes. You know, we are small, and our kitchen is small, as you'll see. And because of that, we have to do things a certain way. And so there's internal controls. This is a big part of Brigtsen's operation. They can see each day, Larry and I do the ordering. I fax over a sheet with all the orders for the day, today's menu, today's prep list with every chef's name and list of duties every day.
Yeah.
This is because I am a line cook. I grew up a line cook, and I know the confusion and questions and crap that can go wrong in a work day. Did this get ordered? Why are we out of this? So we tighten down and try to remove the craziness from our work and control as much as we can so that they can concentrate on the food. And our whole system at night, which is what they learn, the chefs that are doing the cooking, there's 2 spots on the line. All they have to do is cook. They don't even plate their own food. They run out of something, they ask for it, we bring it to them. It's all focused on the food. And what I learned from Paul is food is at its best when it's made. Simple, right? Let's get it from the stove to the table in the shortest amount of time. We don't use trays. We don't use plate covers. We don't even have stations. If there's food in the window, a server, any server will pick it up and deliver it. What I want to see is steam coming off the plate at the table. Yeah. So these are basic fundamental things about our jobs that become second nature. And then the other thing about our philosophy and our cuisine at Brigtsen's is that I have one foot in Creole tradition and then the other in whatever's next.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the questions I had, is because you're so about tradition. You're so about maintaining history and culture and paying it forward and cementing those things and keeping them the same. But there's a lot of people that say you need to keep things fresh to keep your kitchen, your staff excited. And feel like they're growing. So how do you find that balance of maintaining tradition and then also and evolving? Yeah.
Well, a lot of it is our menu changes seasonally, number one. We're just entering into crawfish season, which is a big thing for us. But here's transformation for you. When we opened 35 years ago and we got that big review, I was viewed as, if I remember the words exactly, reinventing Creole cuisine.
Ooh, how'd that feel?
Ooh. like, the hot new kid on the block.
Yeah.
I still feel like I'm doing pretty much the same thing 35 years later, but now I'm considered the old school traditionalist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a title I will proudly carry.
Yeah.
I'll make the gumbo, the trout meuniere, the bread pudding, barbecue shrimp. I will be that person because it's harder and harder to find.
Yeah. Yeah. Chef, I've loved this conversation. Is there anything that you were hoping we would discuss that did not come out of today's chat?
I thought you said 2 days, not 2 hours.
We can go
I'm just getting started.
We can go along. Seriously, I love this conversation. I know you got to start focusing for your dinner service, and we still have the speed round. I just can't say thank you enough. This has been a great chat. All right, we are back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your IT factor? A habit, a trait, a characteristic you most believe contributes to your success?
100% effort.
What is your biggest weakness?
Not giving 100% effort.
Wait, so you give 100% effort and you don't give? I'm confused. What do you mean by that?
Well, it happens when you're 67 years old.
You compare
You know
yourself
what my
to the
New
younger
Year's
version of yourself.
resolution was?
What's that?
Do less.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to compare yourself to the earlier version of yourself, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I can't relate to that yet, but I can imagine that you hold yourself to that same standard, and it becomes harder over time to meet that standard.
Yeah.
That's tough. I get that. What's one question you ask or thing you look for during the interview process when you're growing your team?
Do you have the fire and the desire?
How do you know they have it?
We can see it in their eyes. I can. Are you willing to learn? We can teach you.
Yeah. What happens when you don't find the people who are willing to learn?
It's painful.
Yeah.
The worst part of my job is hiring, and the couple of times I've had to fire. Fortunately, you know, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, because I meet people in my teaching job. So I have people on my radar already for when I get openings.
Got it. What's your biggest challenge today?
Managing the unpredictability of the market, food markets.
How are you dealing with that?
Roll with it.
What else can you do, right?
It's why our menu changes daily. It doesn't change dramatically, but I have the freedom to do that.
Share one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team, a core value, a way to be, a way to act.
One of the things I say when I'm walking out of the kitchen, if I'm not going to be there for service, be safe, make them happy, take care of each other.
What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So this is something that's common within the four walls of your business to go above and beyond what's expected from the guest, but not common throughout the industry.
Be their friend.
What does it mean to be their friend?
I want them to feel like they're in our home, and we get that comment a lot.
What's one book that's a must read to make us a better person or a restaurant owner?
Setting the Table by Danny Meyer.
Go deeper. What's one of your biggest lessons from that book that you didn't previously know?
How transformative true hospitality is. You know, it's by giving, you always receive more than you give.
And I do believe we can transform the world with this industry. I think we're one of the last remaining industries that focuses solely on the relationship. I think we've forgotten how important relationships are to mental health and just general health.
Yes.
And I think we're hanging on to that. And I think that there's going to be a time where we are at the leading edge of bringing that back in a world that's never been more connected and disconnected at the same time.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be the string that's hanging on.
I agree.
That brings us back.
We saw it after Katrina.
Yeah. What is one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
Consider each person as an individual.
So we're talking
Be
about
proactive rather than reactive.
yes. What is one service you've hired or outsourced? So the idea behind this question is how to connect good people with good people. Something you don't do in-house that it makes more sense for you to outsource because this company does it better than you could ever do on your own.
Probably the most radical change in our operation over the years is getting a POS system.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So are you in the market?
No. We've had it for a few years now, and it's been wonderful, learning experience. But we still do reservations by hand, by the phone.
So the next question is kind of aligned with the one that you just shared with us, and this is, I know as a traditional operator, who that you take pride in that. What is one piece of technology you've recently adapted within the restaurant that's had a huge impact on operations?
Yeah, the POS. I mean, dealing with handwritten checks is problematic in its own, but it's helped us run a cleaner, leaner operation.
And what POS are you using?
I
think it was Micros.
PosiTouch.
PosiTouch?
PosiTouch.
PosiTouch. I've heard good things about PosiTouch.
Yeah, it's good.
And this is the last question. It's a doozy. Get ready for it. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be? I love the thought you're putting into this.
Pass it on.
1.
Don't forget your loved ones.
2.
Leave a mark. Do good.
3. I've loved this conversation, Chef. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule for me to share your story, to pass it on. It's been a real treat. And we wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. That's how I found you. Paul Truman called you out. Phil Mosley actually called you out too. I don't know. Are you familiar with Phil? You know Phil. Of course you know Phil. I'm going to be connecting with him and his partner, Ronnie.
I was talking
tomorrow.
about him yesterday.
Yeah, he's great. They're fun dudes.
Oh, I love them to death.
We had fun with them last night. He called you out as well. Who do you respect and admire in this industry? And if you found that they're a guest on the show and you could hear their story and some of the lessons they have, who would that be?
Chef Nina Compton.
I love Chef Nina Compton.
I do too.
She's been on the show. I've had her. I've gotten to her. Anyone else?
She's remarkable, and I'm so happy she chose New Orleans.
Yes. Can you give me another name since I had her recently?
Susan Spicer.
Susan, yes, she is on my list.
One of my dear friends.
I'd love to her.
Don't tell anybody, but she's been my girlfriend for 40 years.
Okay. So it's our secret.
Don't tell my wife.
I mean, I won't tell anyone, but this recording might tell a few people.
Yeah, Susan and I are buds for a long, long time, and I respect and admire her so much. And you know, one thing that she and Nina have in common is that they're hands-on, hard-working chefs.
Yes.
And I admire that to no end.
Nina was great. Susan, you were on my radar even before this. I'd love to get you on the show. I'm coming after you. And I just can't say thank you enough, Chef.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Ah, yes.
Cheers.